On this episode, we get into the spooky, creative, culturally relevant issue of Thai ghosts.
So, if you're a fan of the supernatural, Thai culture, either one or both, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee crap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who followed a friend to Thailand in 2001 and almost immediately learned to appreciate a $3 bottle of rum bought at 7-Eleven.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 17 years ago, fell in love with the Bangkok traffic system, and never left.
It's because you're stuck in traffic.
That's right. I got stuck in traffic and never left.
Well, we want to say a quick thank you before we start to one of our patrons, a young lady by the name of Alyssa Andrea Nicerio, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after we're done talking about Thai ghosts to hear why Alyssa owes me a little bit of money because of a video game that she is designing.
Whoa, sounds interesting. Of course, one of the cool things our patrons get is an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we talk about all kinds of stuff. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we got into sort of an overview of traffic in Thailand, city planning in Thailand, or the un-city planning of Thailand, including why Thais put up with such long commutes, how this is affecting the condo market, and how a British company once tried and failed to computerize Thailand's traffic lights.
Wah, wah. Yeah, that was a fail. All right, before we jump into our main topic, I want to give a quick shout out to some new friends of the show. I went out the other night with Danica, James, Carly, Mark, and Charlotte, who have all recently moved to Bangkok to teach at Shrewsbury and Patana International Schools. They're big fans of the show, and they told me they learned a lot about Bangkok from listening before they came here, which is great to hear. So thanks for picking up the tab, guys. It was great to meet you, and thank you for explaining what a plasterer's radio is. And we will hopefully see you at our upcoming podcast meetup, which we will give more details about on next week's show.
Yeah, cool. They sound like good people.
It was a fun night. All right, so on this episode, we're going to dive into Thai ghosts and their unique place in Thai culture. Now, every culture has ghosts in one way or another, even in Western culture, where most of us are naturally pretty skeptical about these kind of things. But in many Asian cultures, and especially Thailand, ghosts play an important role in the day-to-day life of many people, and even influence how and when people socialize, travel, or how they react to good and bad news. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the role of ghosts in Thai culture, let me just read a few sentences from a story that appeared on Sanuk.com last week. Sanuk reported that residents of a village in Kalasin, which is a province up sort of near the border with Laos, are convinced that an ogre and an evil ghost widow are at work after 5 mysterious deaths in September. In one house, 2 healthy men died within 7 days of each other from what appeared to be fits. But Sanuk reported that marks of strangulation had been found on the neck of one of the men, clear signs that an ogre was responsible, said respected village elders. In another case, a 16-year-old girl was killed when her motorcycle mysteriously collided with another with a sidecar. That was the 5th death and the final straw. Now, virtually every house has an item of red clothing outside with the wording in Thai, "This house has no men." And many males in the village are painting their fingernails red so as to be mistaken for women by vengeful spirits. Sanuk visited the village, and by early evening the streets were as quiet as a graveyard, with villagers cowering in their homes amid fears that they would be the next victim of the ogre and the evil widow of doom. Everyone is clamoring for amulets and other protection as the fear spreads. Now, this is from a story from last week, 2018. So this gives you just a little bit of an idea of how tangible ghost stories are in modern Thailand. So, Ed, what do you think about those?
Well, in fact, I've got a lot of thoughts about it. Since, as listeners know, I actually teach a critical thinking class here in Thailand with almost all my students being Thai. And like in class, we do talk about ghosts and things like that, and whether it makes sense, like reasonably, to believe in ghosts or not. So I've thought about this a lot, and I like how you pointed out that every culture has ghost stories, and every culture, at least some people believe in ghosts. And I think the last time I looked it up in my critical thinking class, last time I did a little research, there was a survey in the U.S. that said that 40% of Americans believe in ghosts. So that's a huge number of people. Now, the percent in Thailand is going to be higher. I think we can agree. It's more than 40%. But even if it's 80%, clearly a lot of people around the world believe in ghosts. So it's not a Thai thing. It's not an Asian thing. I think it's kind of a human thing. Even though even though some cultures may have kind of gotten more skeptical over time, or I don't know if it's a function of just development, education level. I'm not sure what the exact difference is, but it's really a matter of degree.
Well, I think that survey is interesting because that question, like for most people that I know back home, if they said, "Do you believe in ghosts?" and they said yes, that would mean sort of a belief in some type of supernatural or spirits or maybe poltergeists. And I think that's probably as specific as a person would get. Whereas if you ask the person in Thailand, do you believe in ghosts? Yes, they could probably go into great detail about what types of ghosts they believe in and what types of ghosts they've seen because this, and this. So I think this is really great. And one cool thing about Thai culture is just the depth and complexity of the supernatural legends that they have here.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I didn't mean to suggest that belief in ghosts in the West is the same as belief in ghosts here. It's not the same, and it's not just a difference in the percent of people who believe. It's not only that, because I think you're right. I think that when I got here, and I knew Thailand had this reputation of being kind of a superstitious country, but I didn't really realize that a lot of educated Thais and a lot of Thais in Bangkok definitely still believe in ghosts, or at least make some decisions in their lives based on the belief in spirits.
Sure.
I feel like in the States, when you're talking to educated people, the percent is going to be pretty low. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's just my academic way of thinking, or my skepticism coming out. But I, and obviously this village, so your story from Callison, I think these are going to be pretty rural people. So I think these are, again, I'm just generalizing, but this is out in some village somewhere where I think there's not a lot of educated people.
Yeah, probably. But I think you'll also find very similar stories at a lot of people in Bangkok. And of course, those people probably come from all over the country as well. But I think that just because a person is rural doesn't mean that you're any more or less likely to find people believing in ghosts any more or less than they would in Bangkok. Like I've heard tons of ghost stories here.
I mean, the point I made earlier is that that was one of the things I learned when I moved here, is that I was surprised how many educated Thais still believed in ghosts. I think so. So what I'm saying is, at least the way I'm used to thinking in the States, there's kind of a clear divide where like educated people just pretty much don't believe in ghosts, and when uneducated people might. Whereas in Thailand, I think that divide is not valid. Although, it's cool. It's funny, even though I've been teaching critical thinking here, I've never really researched to see if there's like extensive surveys done. Like I don't know if I'm curious, like maybe if you go out into a rural village, the percent of people believe in ghosts is going to be 95%, but then if you ask Bangkok Thais, because, I ask my students, and like in my classes, because I do surveys in my critical thinking class, students, about 30% of the students start out saying they do not believe in ghosts.
Really?
Among my students. 30% say they straight up do not believe. And that's the day one of the critical thinking class.
Yeah, and then of course you press a button behind your desk and some screaming comes from the closet or something like that, a tape recorder. Your goal is to get that up to 100% of everyone believing by the time they leave Ed's class.
Well, it's funny because it's funny you mentioned that, because I've had conversation. I talk to my students about this stuff all the time, and like there'll be a student who says something like, oh, I don't believe in ghosts. That's like silly or whatever. But I remember this one girl who told me she didn't believe in ghosts. She told me that her mom got into an argument with their maid, and their maid left a curse on their house. Like she scratched or painted onto their house some black magic curse, which had caused like her her dog to get sick or something like that.
Oh, really?
But my student told me that like her family had all these problems now because she left some curse on the house.
That's so funny. Like, oh, I don't believe in ghosts. That's for kids. But check out
Right.
this black magic that was thrown at my family.
For real.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when even Taz, like, I mean, it's just the point you made. Even my students who say they don't believe in ghosts, they might believe in other supernatural type things that I think educated Westerners probably would at least be very skeptical about.
Well, the thing that I really love about Thai ghosts is how different they are. There's so many different kinds, and how creative the descriptions are, and the stories are, and the legends are. And let's get into a little bit about the types of ghosts there are in Thailand, because the first time that someone ever told me about a Thai ghost, I remember I was teaching. I had been here about 6 months, and I said to one of the girls, it was a girls' high school, and I said, where is it? Did this girl go to the bathroom? And she said, no, because she would never go by herself. And I said, why not? And I remember the student said, krasu.
Oh, really?
Krasu.
Oh, wow.
and I was like, what's that? And she explained to me. And this ghost is one of my favorite Thai ghosts.
Before you get into P. Krasa, let me just make this point to our listeners.
Okay.
The easiest way to understand Thai ghosts as a Westerner is to think of the pantheon of Greek and Roman gods.
Ooh, that's good. That's real good.
How like there's just a huge number of Greek and Roman gods, and they all have an interesting backstory. When you talk about Thai ghosts, it's really a mythology.
That's a great way to put it. That's really cool.
That's the best way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because like Greg and I tonight are going to mention a few different of these, but there's dozens.
Yeah.
I mean, dozens of Thai ghosts.
Well, this one, the Krasu, the legend is that apparently a young peasant girl had fallen in love with a young nobleman, and this guy was supposed to get married, but they were found out, and as punishment, she was burned at the stake. But as she was being burned, a witch put a protective spell on her, but not in time. So what happened is the protective spell only protected her head and her internal organs, and the rest of her body burned away. So now if you see a krasu, you will see the head of a woman with her esophagus and heart and lungs and intestines trailing down to the floor, floating along. And what she's searching for, the reason why this one student was scared to go into the bathroom, was because the krasu searches for flesh, blood, and shit to eat. And they often are seen in bathrooms.
Oh, God,
that's terrifying, dude.
That is terrifying. No, I remember. I'm glad you brought up P. Krasa, because I also came across this story or saw a picture. I think I saw a picture of P. Krasa, and it's a woman's head with like entrails and like body parts hanging off and like a spine. And it's really scary looking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's genuinely terrifying.
It is a creepy image, and I did a couple of searches on Google, and there's one I saw, and it was of a dark forest at night, and you could just barely make out this floating head with these like entrails dripping down into the ground. Dude, it's terrifying. It's scary as hell.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, this raises an interesting question, and I'm personally fascinated by this question. And the question is what scares people universal, or does it really depend on your culture? In other words, when I learn about certain Thai ghosts, P. Krasa is a good example, I find it terrifying. So as a Westerner, I'm like, that is some scary shit.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. But there are other Thai ghosts that I just don't understand why they're scary at all. Like my favorite example is Nang Tani or P. Tani. And P. Tani is like a female ghost who lives kind of in banana trees.
Okay.
I think she's supposed to come out during the full moon. But every time I've seen a picture of her or like it's been in a movie, it just looks like one of my students standing in banana trees. It just looks like a Thai girl. Like that's it. It's like Nang Tani. It's just like a Thai girl with long black hair standing in some banana trees. And I look at it and I'm like, yeah, like is that scary? Like what? I don't
know, man. If I'm walking through a banana plantation at night with a full moon and I see a girl just standing there looking at me, I'm picking up the pace. You know what I mean?
dude. It's just one of my it's just like one of my students out for a walk or something. No, seriously. But this is an honest question, because in a film class I teach at my university, I have shown the movie The Exorcist. And
Right.
Granted, it's a little bit old now. It's 1972, 1973,
Yeah.
And there have been many copies and stuff like that. But the bottom line is, The Exorcist, if you can put yourself in the mindset of like a 12 or 13-year-old, that is a terrifying movie.
Yeah, I remember I saw that when I was about 15 on VHS, and that was the first time that a movie went past scary to disturbing. Like, it messed with me when I was a kid.
I can't believe that movie was not rated X. I believe it somehow got an R rating. Like that movie should have been banned. And it's just weird and creepy and horrifying and blasphemous. It's whatever. I love it, but it's horrifying. So here's the weird thing. I show it to my students, and then my students have to write in a journal as soon as they're done seeing a movie. So as soon as we finish the movie, they take out their journals and they write what they think about it. And then I check their journals later. So I get to read my students' first impressions of The Exorcist.
Okay.
And I would say more than half, maybe let's say 60% of my students don't think Exorcist is scary at all. And a bunch of them will say that they found it like silly or ridiculous.
Man, you got some badass students.
Well, here's my theory. My theory is that, and they come from a culture that kind of believes in ghosts or whatever. But I think that The Exorcist is very Christian in its style. In particular, it's very Catholic. Like just the imagery and the priests and the exorcism. These are like Catholic rituals.
Yeah.
And for Thai people, they don't understand the holy water being splashed and the cross and the imagery. So I think The Exorcist is very Western. It's very Catholic, and I don't think it translates that well into Thai culture.
Well, that's interesting, because there's that one horrifying scene where the little girl is possessed and she starts stabbing herself in the crotch with a crucifix. Like that's messed up on like 9 different levels. Right.
Totally.
Whereas for someone who's raised in a Judeo-Christian culture, but for someone who's raised in a Buddhist culture, that might just seem like gross, like ew.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean, I was kind of surprised when I read my students' feedback, because a lot of my students said stuff like, "This is goofy," or "It's silly," or it's
crazy.
like her head spinning around. They thought was kind of ridiculous. Now, some of them. So that's not all students. Like a significant minority thought it was scary. But I think if you showed it to Americans, I think it might be the opposite. It would be like 70-30 the other way. So this is my point. My point is, like, and you and I both know some filmmakers here in Thailand. We've talked about Tom Waller and Paul Spurrier, and we know filmmakers, and they have both dabbled in horror movies. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're a filmmaker, if you're a Westerner and you want to make a horror movie, you have to think about, is your intended audience Thai people or is it Western? Because I'm not sure the same things will be scary.
I just can't imagine watching The Exorcist and hearing like boing when someone crawls down the stairs or something.
Well, the sound effects. Okay, we're not talking about horror comedy. Okay, that's a whole nother topic. You and I both agree there are some really good Thai horror movies. We both love the movie Shudder for sure. We love the Thai movie Shudder. It scared the crap out of me.
If we play it fast and loose with the term love there, I think I appreciate, but there's no way I'm ever watching that movie again.
It's terrifying. But here's my question. Actually, the Man Knock story better than I do. So you can tell the Man Knock story. But if Westerners watched the Man Knock movie, would they think it was scary?
Well, let's see. Well, the Man Knock is probably the most famous Thai ghost story. And if you're not familiar with it, here's how it plays out very quickly. So Man Knock was a woman who got pregnant, and she died in childbirth while her husband was away at war. But she loved him so much that her and her baby didn't cross over to the spirit realm. So when her husband returns, his wife was waiting for him, and he didn't know that anything was wrong. So they lived in peace for a while in the neighborhood, just going on with their daily life. And everyone who tried to warn the husband that something was wrong, they would suddenly turn up dead. So Manak was killing people to try and keep her secret, to keep her happy life. But one day she's cooking some food out on the little porch balcony area there, and she drops a lime, and she reaches for it, but not realizing that she's a spirit, her arm stretches way out and catches the lime like 15 feet away. So her husband sees this, and he realizes what's happened. So he runs away, and she goes nuts. So Manak starts, going through the village and haunting people and destroying things and stuff like that. Finally, an exorcist is called in, and he traps her in a jar and throws her into a river, and she sinks to the bottom of the river. The story changes depending on who you talk to, but eventually someone digs up the jar later, and she escapes, and she goes on a rampage again. But there's a very famous monk by the name of Somdet To, and he's a famous Somdet Do, I think. He's a famous monk, and he's one of the sons of King Rama I. And he's called in. He was a very powerful monk, apparently, and he captures her, and he traps her in a bone fragment, which he binds to his waistband. And legend has it that waistband is still kept safe by some of Thailand's most powerful families. So that's a cool story.
It's a very cool story. That's a good example of Thai mythology there. And there's been many movie versions of Manak. But that's a cool story. So I think if that was well done, Westerners, I think, could find that scary.
Yeah, but I do remember seeing the scene where she reaches out with her arm, and it looks a little bit goofy. And it maybe was the special effects, or it maybe was like a Thai person might see that and go, "Oh my God!" But I saw it and went, "Oh man, she really got that lime." Maybe this is another example of just a cultural disattachment.
Yeah, I wonder if the background, because like Thai people would be primed to be scared of these ghosts based on like children's stories. It's like I might have been told the story of the Headless Horseman when I was a kid.
That in itself is a very scary cartoon.
It's a scary story. But then if I saw a Headless Horseman movie as an adult, I might be more likely to be scared because I remember the story as a kid.
Maybe, and especially when they cast Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman. I mean, he's scary on his own, but
he is, no doubt.
But it's funny, we talk about these stories and I mean, they have a certain detachment from reality. But check this out. There's another type of Thai ghost called a kumantong. And the story goes, if you take the corpse of a child, you cook it, and you perform a ritual on the corpse, you cover the corpse in gold leaf, and then leave it toys and juice as an offering, then the spirit will do your bidding. Right?
Okay, that is kind of the definition of creepy.
Yeah, it's creepy, but you're like, okay, well, that's a particularly grim ghost story. Ha ha ha. But then check this out. In 2012, a Taiwanese businessman was caught in Bangkok with 6 fetuses in Chinatown. And all of the fetuses were covered in gold leaf after having been roasted as part of a black magic ritual. And he bought them for 200,000 baht from someone in Thailand, and he planned to sell them on a black magic website in Taiwan for up to 6 times the amount he paid for them here. So we hear that story and you're like, wow, that's a crazy story. But I mean, this was 6 years ago. This dude was caught with gold leaf covered fried child corpses.
I'm not going to get preachy about this kind of stuff, but to me, this is why critical thinking is so important. It's like, there's a certain aspect to superstition that is charming. Like I said, I think all these Thai ghost stories they're fascinating, they're cool, and to me, it's a type of literature. It's fascinating, cool, but the simple truth is that when people believe in a lot of this stuff, it can lead them to do crazy, horrible things. Now, sure. I don't know where those fetuses came from, but I don't want to know. I don't want to know where the fetuses came from.
Yeah. There's a bunch of other ones too. My favorite ghost is a very Thai ghost. It's called Pi Pret. I'm probably saying that wrong, but that's how I'm spelling it here. And it's a very giant, tall ghost who has a ravenous hunger, but a tiny pinhole mouth, so he can never eat enough. And that's a very Thai ghost.
Wait, so he's a giant? That's what you're saying?
He's a giant, yeah. But he's got a tiny mouth, so he can never eat enough, so he's always hungry. that's just so Thai. Like, you're not going to hell. You're going to be cursed with eternal hunger.
But is that scary? Like, I wonder what he does. Like, does he try to eat people?
I'm not sure. But I think that's probably. I mean, the idea of being eternally hungry is probably enough to dissuade most Thai people from doing bad things. Like, you better not do this, otherwise you're going to be turned into a pea bread.
Oh, that's funny. That's very funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, I do want to talk about Thai ghost movies a little bit more, and we have to distinguish a true Thai ghost movie from a like horror comedy movie. So we talked about this on a bonus episode a couple weeks ago. And if our listeners, if you're not familiar with Thai cinema, Thailand has a weird subgenre best called horror comedy, where they somehow manage to combine like ghost elements with kind of very silly humor. And I don't get it. I don't like it at all. But there are straight horror movies. So Thai people do love just a real ghost story, not a silly, not a comedy.
Yeah, and then they do them really well. Some of them are not so good. But we mentioned The Shudder earlier, and listener, if you haven't seen the Thai ghost movie The Shudder, the original, because it was remade, I think, as an American movie, and you have to check it out. It is so scary.
Yeah,
it is, and the type of ghost in that movie is something that is related to another one that I heard about, and it's a bit scary to me. But this other ghost is called P Am. And have you ever sort of woken up at night and you either are like so tired you can't move, or are approaching or having night terrors or night paralysis or sleep paralysis or whatever they call it? Well, you might have a P Am, and the P Am sits on your chest when you're sleeping and looks at you. Dude, that's scary as hell.
That is scary. Well, I mean, I don't want to give away too much about Shudder, but
man, I'm never watching that movie again.
Yeah, Shudder has something similar, and it's very scary. Now, the thing about Shudder is, I was scared by it, and so it kind of shows you that some horror, some fright, I think, is universal.
I can see that.
The other thing I want to point out is that you know how there's a certain style of Japanese ghost movie, like movies like Ju-on and Ringo or whatever, like The Ring got remade from.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think Thailand has its own style. Like, I think they've been influenced by those Japanese movies, but it's like once you watch a couple like Thai ghost movies, it's like you realize they have their own style. It's not exactly like the Japanese.
No, it's not. And I think, again, that shows just the real creativity and cultural nuance that comes out of this, that they sort of took elements from here and here and here and spun them around a bit and created their own very unique and dynamic ghost culture, I guess you would call it.
Ghost mythology.
Ghost mythology. There's another really good movie that's one of my all-time favorite ghost movies, and it's actually a Hong Kong Thai co-production, and it takes place in Hong Kong and Bangkok and Isan, and it's called The Eye. And it too was remade as a crappy American movie. Don't even bother with that one. But this one is really, really freaky, and it's about a woman who is blind, but she gets a cornea transplant, and as her eyes start to come into focus and work again, she starts seeing spirits and ghosts and things like that. And she tracks down the original owner of the corneas that she had transplanted, and it turns out to be a Thai girl who committed suicide. And sort of it's her quest to find out what happened. And it's so subtle, and it's like one of those things like where you watch a scene and you're like, wait a minute, did I see it in that window that they walked by? Was there a reflection of something horrifying? And you rewind it and you're like, oh Jesus, there is. And it's not even part of the story, it's just there as something subtle and scary. It's really, really good.
Well, I got to say, I've heard great things about that movie, but I've actually never seen it. So I will put it on my list of movies to see.
Yeah, and I also want to give out a shout out to something I just heard about today. Actually, my buddy Matthew showed this to me, and it is a Thai ghost video game called Home Sweet Home. And apparently it's been out for a few years on Steam and a couple of these other video game networks, but it's soon to come to PlayStation and other consoles. And there's a trailer on YouTube for this Thai game called Home Sweet Home, and it looks really creepy, man. There's like you're wandering around these dark, deserted houses, and there's noises and little like skittering around you, and Thai style ghosts that you have to deal with. All the ones we've talked about, the krasu and the giant ghost and the banana ghost.
Cool.
It looks really, really neat. So if you're a video game person, check that out. I am never playing a scary video game ever again after I played a game called Amnesia: The Dark Descent one time. And that movie messed with me almost as much as The Exorcist did. Sorry, that video game. But yeah, if you're a fan of those particular things, check that out.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, you know, I know there's kind of a horror genre of video games, and I never really checked it out. But I love that idea. You know,
Yeah.
of taking from this mythology and putting it in a game.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping things up here, then, like, what can we say about Thai culture based on its ghost stories? Like, what kind of a mirror does that hold up to Thai culture? What does that say about the types of mythology that it produces?
God, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you that it's very creative, and I think the best way to think of it is as like it's literature. You know, it might be kind of like an oral literature that's, you know, who knows how old a lot of these stories are, but I really think it's a legitimate art form. I mean, it's obviously the stories have been written down, and I'm not exactly sure where all the stories come from, but it's certainly one of the more interesting aspects of Thai culture. At least I think so.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great way to look at it. It's literature. It's a really, really creative, culturally driven mythology that touches almost every level of modern Thai culture. So it's really interesting to see and understand. And now also interesting to watch how it develops, you know, moving from books and comic books from oral stories to movies to video games, you know, like what's next? It's kind of exciting, you know?
It is.
And as a last quick note, if you want to see some of the ghosts we're talking about, there's a very funny commercial. Just go to YouTube and Google Sylvania light bulb Thai ghost commercial, and you'll see it. And it's about basically how things are only really scary when the lights are turned off. But it's a very cute, funny commercial, and have cameos by a lot of the ghosts we talked about tonight. So,
Oh, really? A lot of those famous ghosts are in there.
yeah. You see them. It's only 30 seconds long or something, but it's very cute, very funny, very well done.
Oh, that's great.
I'll put a link to it in our show notes. All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or leave, where one of us surprises the other with a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or hate so much that it makes us want to leave forever. And this week, it's my turn, so I got something for you, Ed.
All right, I'm ready to go.
Now, this is maybe not something that specifically you love or loathe, but it's something that you might sort of enjoy dealing with, or it's not a problem for you, or it is a problem, I don't know. But have you ever been out in the boonies, maybe not in one of the big malls or something like that, maybe one of these smaller malls or a gas station somewhere, and you have to go to the bathroom for, a number 2, and you walk up there, and a lot of these bathrooms, you pay some money. All right, sure, I'll pay some money. Here's $5. And they might give you a little box of toilet paper,
Right.
which contains about 12 square centimeters of usable paper. Is this something that you love?
This is not a love. I've been there. I don't want to get into too much detail, but I've been there.
Yeah.
Well, the odd thing is that the lack of adequate toilet paper, it strangely mirrors the lack of adequate napkins at a lot of restaurants.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know what I'm saying? It's like a lot of restaurants have like small, thin, papery napkins that are almost useless for like any reasonably sized human being.
Right.
And then the same thing is you go into some of these toilets like outside of the city, and as you pointed out, you get like 5 squares of thin paper, and you know it's like it's not like the amount of toilet paper they give you. It's not like it's off by like 50%. It's like off by like 500%. It's like they give you a little cardboard box, and you're like, I need 5 more of those.
At least, like, you're like, dude, I had a 5 chili cow man guy last night. Fill up my pillowcase here. I got to take it into the bathroom.
Yeah, I wonder. I guess one of the factors could just be like we're bigger than most Thai people, but come on, It's like I said, it's not a difference of 50%. It's like they're giving you like 10% of the toilet paper that you need.
Right. It's like asking for a ladder to change a light bulb and someone gives you a book to stand on. You're like, dude.
This ain't gonna cut it. Maybe it has something to do with I don't know if we really want to get into toilet etiquette, but this could have something to do with like the bum gun and like the extent to which you rely on paper versus like the bum gun. There could be like it could have something to do with that.
I don't know, man. It's a slippery slope, no pun intended. But yeah, without getting into too much detail, let's just say it's not something I look forward to dealing with.
The bum gun is a whole nother show. Like that's a whole nother show in itself.
The bum gun special. It'll be a Songkran special for next year.
That's great. So anyway, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Alyssa. What was her last name? She had a super cool last name.
Neserio.
Yeah, that's a great name, Alyssa.
I think I said that right. I even asked the Filipino coworker how to say it, and I think that's what he said to me. I'm pretty sure.
That is a cool name, Alyssa Neserio. That's a very cool name.
You got to roll that R though, Alyssa Neserio.
I'm not even going to try that. That's I'm not going to embarrass myself. Anyway, we want to say thank you to Alyssa for lending us her support at the show shout-out level. So, Greg, what actually did you find out about Alyssa?
Well, as it turns out, Alyssa is from the Philippines, and she's been in Bangkok for 4 years. She works as a game tester, which is a pretty cool job. Well, but I did a bit of research, and it turns out Alyssa is working on her own game called Angry Farang.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
That's crazy.
It's about a nice guy who sometimes loses his temper when dealing with Thai bureaucracy and turns into a huge raging jerk with anger management issues and smashes up the joint.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea, but I looked up some images and guess what? The character looks just like me. So,
well, you do occasionally take on the persona of an angry farang.
That's it. It's my contention that Alyssa has listened to the show in the past and based her character on previous stories of me losing my temper.
Wow.
Of course, it's not entirely unwarranted, but still, Alyssa, I believe you owe me some cash for likeness rights once your video game comes out. So how about this? Let's you and me, Alyssa, meet up in Overwatch, and whoever's not a mutated mess at the end will win this argument.
Dude, it sounds like she owes you.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. Don't worry about that. And also, Alyssa lives in the Victory Monument area. So I'll tell you what, Alyssa, our next neighborhood focus show, we will be doing the Victory Monument. Some of my all-time favorite noodles.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a cool area.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our patrons who are listening now. As we say over and over again, we don't run ads or have sponsors, so we really, really do appreciate the support we get from our patrons. And if you want to get in touch with us, we are at Bangkok Podcast on Facebook and Twitter, or you can send us a message via the contact form on bangkokpodcast.com or just bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We always write back. If you write it, we will answer it.
Yep, and you can find us on the Line app where we post each episode and carry on conversations with our listeners. We're up to like 312 friends now on Line, which is pretty neat.
Nice.
And you can also reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKK Craig. So thanks for listening, everyone. Really do appreciate your ears and your time, and we'll see you back here next week. But, man, I can really hear that rain coming down.
It's pouring now, man.
Not here yet.
It's pouring here. I can hear it.
Okay.